Okay, today is the 3rd of August. We come to Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 37, Chula Tanha Sankhaya Sutta, the shorter discourse on the destruction of craving. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern park, in the palace of Megara's mother. Then Sakadeva Raja went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he stood at one side and asked, Venerable Sir, how in brief is a monk liberated by the destruction of craving, one who has reached the ultimate end, the ultimate security from bondage, the ultimate holy life, the ultimate goal, one who is foremost among gods and humans? And the Buddha replied, Here, Devaraja, a ruler of gods, a monk has heard that nothing is worth adhering to. When a monk has heard that nothing is worth adhering to, he directly knows everything. Having directly known everything, he fully understands everything. Having fully understood everything, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he abides contemplating impermanence in those feelings, contemplating fading away, contemplating cessation, contemplating relinquishment. Contemplating thus, he does not cling to anything in the world. When he does not cling, he is not agitated. When he is not agitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Briefly, it is in this way, ruler of gods, that a monk is liberated by the destruction of craving, one who has reached the ultimate end, the ultimate security from bondage, the ultimate holy life, the ultimate goal, one who is foremost among gods and humans. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha explains how a monk is liberated, and the Buddha says the monk understands that nothing is worth adhering to, attaching to, and then having understood that, whatever feeling he feels, he knows that it is impermanent, and because of that, he does not cling to anything in the world. He does not cling to anything, because anything, the normal, ordinary person, anything that gives him pleasure, anything that gives him happiness, in other words, pleasant feeling, he will cling to. Anything that gives him suffering, he is averse to it. But this monk who has cultivated himself, he knows that the things in the world that give us happiness, those things that make us stay on in samsara, because worldly pleasures, those things in the world that give us pleasure, when we enjoy it, there is a tendency to crave for it. But for a monk who has developed his mind, he is able not to crave for worldly things. Why? Because the Buddha's teaching is that the monk is supposed to attain jhana. When a monk attains jhana, he experiences a pleasure and a happiness which surpasses worldly happiness. That being the case, he does not cling to worldly happiness because he has a higher happiness. And also because the mind is so strong and also when the mind attains jhana, the hindrance of sensual desire is eliminated. So he is no more in the easily caught by Mara. Mara can catch us at the sixth sense basis by letting us see beautiful forms, hearing beautiful sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. So that is the way. So a monk, if he does not cling to anything in the world, then he is not agitated. The mind is very peaceful, equanimous, and he can attain Nibbana. Then Sakka Devaraja, delighting and rejoicing in the Blessed One's words, paid homage to the Blessed One, and keeping him on his right, he vanished at once. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahamoggallana was sitting not far from the Blessed One. Then he considered, did that spirit penetrate to the meaning of the Blessed One's words when he rejoiced, or did he not? Suppose I found out whether he did or not. Then just as quickly as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm, the Venerable Mahamoggallana vanished from the palace of Migara's mother in the eastern park and appeared among the gods of the 33 Tavatimsa heaven. Now on that occasion, Sakka Devaraja was furnished and endowed 100-fold with the 5 kinds of heavenly music, and he was enjoying it in the pleasure park of the single lotus. When he saw the Venerable Mahamoggallana coming in the distance, he dismissed the music, went to the Venerable Mahamoggallana and said to him, "Come, good Sir Moggallana, welcome, good Sir Moggallana. It is long, good Sir Moggallana, since you found an opportunity to come here. Sit down, good Sir Moggallana, this seat is ready." The Venerable Mahamoggallana sat down on the seat made ready, and Sakka took a low seat and sat down at one side. The Venerable Mahamoggallana then asked him, "Kosya, how did the Blessed One state to you in brief deliverance through the destruction of craving? It would be good if we might also get to hear that statement." Let's stop here for a moment. You notice here, when Venerable Mahamoggallana was invited to sit down, Sakka Devaraja took a lower seat. These devas, they have great respect for these arahants. And the Venerable Mahamoggallana called him Kosya. Kosya is one of the personal names or nicknames of the Sakka Devaraja. It seems the meaning is the owl. I don't know why they call him the owl. Good Sir Moggallana, we are so busy, we have so much to do, not only with our own business, but also with the business of the gods of the 33. Besides, good Sir Moggallana, what is well heard, well learned, well attended to, well remembered, does not vanish all of a sudden. Good Sir Moggallana, it once happened that war broke out between the gods, devas, and the asuras. Stop here for a moment. The devas are those devas under Sakka Devaraja, and the asuras are another type of deva in the heaven of the 33, which constantly fight with them. In that war, the devas won, and the asuras were defeated. When I had won that war and returned from it as a conqueror, I had the Vijayanta palace built. Good Sir Moggallana, the Vijayanta palace has 100 towers, and each tower has 700 upper chambers, and each upper chamber has 7 nymphs, and each nymph has 7 maids. Would you like to see the loveliness of the Vijayanta palace? Good Sir Moggallana. Venerable Mahamoggallana consented in silence. I'll stop here for a moment. Maybe I continue. Then Sakka Devaraja and the divine King Vesavana went to the Vijayanta palace, giving precedence to the Venerable Mahamoggallana. Stop here for a moment. This King Vesavana is the king of the Yakas. King of the Yakas. The Yaka Devaraja is Vesavana. When the maids of Sakka saw the Venerable Mahamoggallana coming in the distance, they were embarrassed and ashamed, and they went each into their own rooms. Just as a daughter-in-law is embarrassed and ashamed on seeing her father-in-law, so too, when the maids of Sakka saw the Venerable Mahamoggallana coming, they were embarrassed and ashamed, and they went each into their own rooms. Then Sakka Devaraja and the divine King Vesavana had the Venerable Mahamoggallana walk all over and explore the Vijayanta palace. See, good Sir Moggallana, this loveliness of the Vijayanta palace. See, good Sir Moggallana, this loveliness of the Vijayanta palace. And Venerable Mahamoggallana said, it does the Venerable Kosya credit as one who has formerly made merit. And whenever human beings see anything lovely, they say, Sirs, it does credit to the gods of the 33. It does the Venerable Kosya credit as one who has formerly made merit. Stop here for a moment. So this Sakadeva Raja, having done a lot of good deeds in the past, now he is born as Deva Raja in this heaven of the 33. He's enjoying life. If you look at the description, his palace has 100 towers, and each tower has 700 upper chambers, and each upper chamber has 7 nymphs, and each nymph has 7 maids. So if the nymphs are supposed to be his wives. So if you multiply 100 towers by 700 upper chambers by 7 Devis, you get 490,000 Devis. So he's got 500,000 wives. Not to mention the maids. Maids number about 3.5 million. So you see his great blessing. Then the Venerable Mahamoggallana considered thus: this spirit is living much too negligently. What if I stirred up a sense of urgency in him? Then the Venerable Mahamoggallana performed such a feat of supernormal power that with the point of his toe he made the Vejayanta palace shake and quake and tremble. Sakha and the divine king Vesavana and the gods of the 33 were filled with wonder and amazement, and they said, Sirs, it is wonderful, it is marvelous, what power and might the recluse has, that with the point of his toe he makes the heavenly region shake and quake and tremble. When the Venerable Mahamoggallana knew that Sakha, ruler of the gods, or Devaraja, was stirred to a sense of urgency with his hair standing on end, he asked him, Kosya, how did the Blessed One state to you in brief deliverance through the destruction of craving? It would be good if we might also get to hear that statement. Stop here for a moment. So you see, when the Venerable Mahamoggallana arrived at the heaven, the first thing he did was to ask Sakadeva Raja to repeat what the Buddha said. But this Devaraja, he wanted to show Venerable Mahamoggallana his beautiful palace and brought him all around. He forgot about the question. So Venerable Mahamoggallana saw that this Devaraja was living in such luxury with 500,000 wives. So he decided to make him a bit frightened. So with his toe, he shook the whole heaven, and this Sakha Devaraja's hair also stood on end. But because they have psychic power, they knew that Venerable Moggallana was the one who did it. And he said, Good Sir Moggallana, I went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, I stood at one side and said, Venerable Sir, how in brief is a monk liberated by the destruction of craving, one who has reached the ultimate end, the ultimate security from bondage, the ultimate holy life, the ultimate goal, one who is foremost among gods and humans? And the Buddha replied. When this was said, Good Sir Moggallana, the Blessed One told me, Hear, ruler of gods, a monk has heard that nothing is worth adhering to. When a monk has heard that nothing is worth adhering to, he directly knows everything. Having directly known everything, he fully understands everything. Having fully understood everything, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he abides contemplating impermanence in those feelings, contemplating fading away, contemplating cessation, contemplating relinquishment. Contemplating thus, he does not cling to anything in the world. When he does not cling, he is not agitated. When he is not agitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Briefly, it is in this way, Devaraja, that a monk is liberated by the destruction of craving, one who has reached the ultimate end, the ultimate security from bondage, the ultimate holy life, the ultimate goal, one who is foremost among gods and humans. That is how the Blessed One stated to me in brief deliverance through the destruction of craving. Good Sir Moggallana. Stop here for a moment. So you see, this Devaraja, his memory is very good. He can repeat exactly what the Buddha said. Then the Venerable Mahamoggallana delighted and rejoiced in the words of Sakadeva Raja. Then, just as quickly as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm, he vanished from among the gods of the 33 and appeared in the eastern park in the palace of Migara's mother. You see here, these arahants, their psychic power is much greater than the devas. He can just disappear from the heaven of the 33 and immediately appear on earth. Then soon after the Venerable Mahamoggallana had gone, the attendants of Sakadeva Raja asked him, "Good sir, was that your teacher, the Blessed One?" And he replied, "No, good sirs, that was not my teacher, the Blessed One. That was one of my companions in the holy life, Venerable Mahamoggallana." And they said, "Good sir, it is a gain for you that your companion in the holy life has such power and might. Oh, how much more so that the Blessed One is your teacher." Stop here for a moment. So here Sakadeva Raja said Mahamoggallana is his companion in the holy life. Why? Because they have the same teacher, Buddha. So in Chinese, Venerable Mahamoggallana is Sakadeva Raja's Sisyong, Suhia. In the Digha Nikaya Sutta 21, we find that Sakadeva Raja, after meeting the Buddha and learning some Dhamma, he became a Sotapanna. So he's also an Arya. And Aryans like to listen to the Dhamma. That's why he came to ask the Buddha some more Dhamma. Then the Venerable Mahamoggallana went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and asked, "Venerable Sir, does the Blessed One recall stating in brief to a certain one of the renowned spirits with a great following, deliverance through the destruction of craving?" And the Buddha said, "I do recall doing so, Moggallana. Here, Sakadeva Raja came to me, and after paying homage to me, he stood at one side and asked, 'Venerable Sir, how in brief is a monk liberated by the destruction of craving, etc.' And the Buddha said exactly how he replied. That is how I recall stating in brief to Sakadeva Raja, deliverance through the destruction of craving. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Mahamoggallana was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words." That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta doesn't have that much Dhamma, but it's interesting how Sakadeva Raja is so blessed that he spends his days enjoying himself, entertained by the Devis with 5 kinds of heavenly music in the pleasure park of the single lotus. And he has this huge palace with 500,000 wives. Now we come to Sutta 38, Mahatanha Sankhaya Sutta, the greater discourse on the destruction of craving. This one is a bit longer. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Nathapindika's park. Now on that occasion a pernicious view had arisen in a monk named Sati, son of a fisherman, thus, "As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the round of rebirths, not another." I'll stop here for a moment. So here, this Sati has this wrong view that it is the same consciousness that goes from birth to birth to the round of samsara. Several monks, having heard about this, went to the monk Sati and asked him, "Friend Sati, is it true that such a pernicious view has arisen in you?" And he said, "Exactly so, friends. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the round of rebirths, not another." Then those monks, desiring to detach him from that pernicious view, pressed and questioned and cross-questioned him thus, "Friend Sati, do not say so. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One. It is not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not speak thus. For in many discourses the Blessed One has stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. Yet although pressed and questioned and cross-questioned by those monks in this way, the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, who still obstinately adhered to that pernicious view and continued to insist upon it. Since the monks were unable to detach him from that pernicious view, they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told him all that had occurred, adding, "Venerable Sir, since we could not detach the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, from this pernicious view, we have reported this matter to the Blessed One." Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus, "Come, monk, tell the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, in my name that the teacher calls him." "Yes, Venerable Sir," he replied. And he went to the monk Sati and told him, "The teacher calls you, friend Sati." "Yes, friend," he replied. And he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, "Sati, is it true that the following pernicious view has arisen in you? As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the round of rebirths, not another." And he said, "Exactly so, Venerable Sir. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the round of rebirths, not another." And the Buddha asked him, "What is that consciousness, Sati?" And he said, "Venerable Sir, it is that which speaks and feels and experiences here and there the result of good and bad actions." And the Buddha said, "Misguided man, to whom have you ever known me to teach the Dhamma in that way? Misguided man, in many discourses have I not stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. But you, misguided man, have misrepresented us by your wrong grasp and injured yourself and stored up much demerit, for this will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time." Stop here for a moment. So the Buddha is saying that consciousness is dependently arisen. It arises through conditions. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, "Monks, what do you think? Has this monk Sati, son of the fisherman, kindled even a spark of wisdom in this Dhamma Vinaya?" "How could he, Venerable Sir?" "No, Venerable Sir." When this was said, the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum and without response. Then knowing this, the Blessed One told him, "Misguided man, you will be recognized by your own pernicious view. I shall question the monks on this matter." Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, "Monks, do you understand Dhamma taught by me as this monk Bhikkhu, son of a fisherman, does when he misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit?" And he said, "No, Venerable Sir, for in many discourses the Blessed One has stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness." And the Buddha said, "Good monks, it is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me thus. For in many discourses I have stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. But this monk Sati, son of a fisherman, misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit, for this will lead to the harm and suffering of this misguided man for a long time." Monks, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the eye and forms, it is reckoned as eye consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odors, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Just as a fire is reckoned by the particular condition dependent on which it burns. When fire burns dependent on logs, it is reckoned as a log fire. When fire burns dependent on faggots, it is reckoned as a faggot fire. When fire burns dependent on grass, it is reckoned as a grass fire. When fire burns dependent on cow dung, it is reckoned as a cow dung fire. When fire burns dependent on chaff, it is reckoned as a chaff fire. When fire burns dependent on rubbish, it is reckoned as a rubbish fire. So too, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent on which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the I and forms, it is reckoned as I consciousness, etc., etc. So here, the Buddha is saying that consciousness, there are 6 types. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, mind consciousness. And these 6 consciousness, each one of them arises through conditions. For example, the eye consciousness arises because of forms coming before the eye. And the consciousness arises, and when you pay attention, there's a meeting of the tree, then there is contact. So these 6 consciousness, they arise and pass away, arise and pass away, each one arising and passing away. So it is so fast, consciousness arises and passes away so fast. The Buddha says nothing works so fast as the mind, nothing is faster than the mind. So even in 1 second, we don't know how many consciousness arises and passes away. It is so extremely fast that a normal person cannot detect. So you will think that consciousness is continuous, but it's not continuous. It arises and passes away, arises and passes away. Just as I gave the simile of the neon lights, the lights, one on and off, another one on and off, and it goes in a line. Then you see the line as though it's a continuous line moving. It seems like a continuous line moving, but actually it's not moving. Monks, do you see this has come to be? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see its origination occurs with that as nutriment? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see with the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation? Yes, Venerable Sir. I stop here for a moment. So this has come to be, according to the commentary, this is the 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates has come to be. And its origination occurs with condition, nutriment, and with the cessation of that nutriment, it will cease. But then another way of looking at it is also, you can say, a being has come to be. A being has come to be through conditions and through nutriment, and it will cease with the ceasing of that nutriment. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? Has this come to be or not? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? Does its origination occur with that as nutriment or not? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus, with the cessation of that nutriment, in what has come to be subject to cessation or not? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, when one is uncertain, then doubt arises. But when one sees as it actually is with proper wisdom, then doubt is abandoned. Now how does one see with proper wisdom? When one's mind is clear of the 5 hindrances. Only when your mind is clear of the 5 hindrances, then you can see things as they actually are. Then doubt will be abandoned. Doubt is one of the 5 hindrances. When a person attains jhana, samadhi, concentration, then the mind is focused and the 5 hindrances fall away, and doubt is one of them. Monks, are you free from doubt here? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you free from doubt here? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you free from doubt here? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is asking his other monk disciples whether they are free from doubt, and they say yes to all this. That shows that the mind is freed of doubt because they have attained the elimination of the 5 hindrances through jhana. And the Buddha said, monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand the Dhamma that has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you do not adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand the Dhamma that has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that the purpose of the Dhamma is to help us attain liberation, not for knowledge's sake. A lot of people like to acquire a lot of knowledge, and then they want to show off that they have a lot of knowledge. But that is not the purpose. The purpose is to attain liberation. At least the lowest is Sotapanna, the first Aryan stage. Similarly, Vinaya also, not only Dhamma, Vinaya rules also are not to be grasped. It is meant to help us practice to become liberated. If you attach to it too much, we don't know what is the purpose. The purpose is to help us towards liberation. So if it does help us, then it is important. If it does not help us to attain liberation, then it is not important. Monks, there are these 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that already have come to be, and for the support of those seeking a new existence. What for? They are physical food as nutriment, gross or subtle, contact as the second, mental volition as the third, and consciousness as the fourth. I'll stop here for a moment just to explain the 4 nutriments. Ahara. This word ahara, nutriment, has gone into the Thai vocabulary. Buddhist country, they tend to take some of the Pali words as part of their vocabulary. So food in Thailand is called ahan. Ahan is short for ahara. Ahara, and it becomes ahan. So what are these 4? The first one is physical food. Physical food we need to nourish our body. The Buddha says in some sutta that all beings need nutriment. All beings need nutriment. Even heavenly beings, they have heavenly food. And hell beings also need food. Even ghosts and all that. And then contact is the second. Contact, why is contact nutriment? Because when there is contact at the 6 sense basis, then the mind starts to work. You have once you have contact at the 6 sense basis, for example, contact means you see an object, or you hear a sound, smell an odor, etc. So once that happens, there is contact, feeling arises, followed by perception, thinking, volition, and all that. So that is the nutriment for the mind. Mental volition is the will to live. Because of the will to live, there are some people, they is a nutriment for the maintenance of life. For example, in war, some soldiers are shot, and then when they are badly wounded, some of them they just let go and die. But some who have families, when they think of their wife and their children, then they refuse to die. So their mental volition, the will to live, is very strong, and they just hold on to life, and sometimes they live. Consciousness is nutriment to the being in the womb. When this egg in the womb is fertilized by the sperm, and then that is the condition for consciousness to descend into the womb, and then it is a nutriment for beings seeking a new existence. So the first three is the maintenance. The first three is for maintenance of beings that have already come to be. The fourth consciousness is for the support of those seeking a new existence. These are the four nutriments. Now monks, these four kinds of nutriment have what as their source, what as their origin, from what are they born and produced. These four kinds of nutriment have craving as their source, craving as their origin. They are born and produced from craving. And it is this craving, and this craving has what as its source? Craving has feeling as its source. And this feeling has what as its source? Feeling has contact as its source. And this contact has what as its source? Contact has the sixfold base as its source. And this sixfold base has what as its source? The sixfold base has mentality, materiality as its source, Namarupa. And this mentality, materiality has what as its source? Mentality, materiality has consciousness as its source. And this consciousness has what as its source? Consciousness has volition, sankhara as its source. And this volition has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Volition has ignorance as its source, ignorance as its origin. It is born and produced from ignorance. So monks, with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, mentality, materiality. When mentality, materiality as condition, the sixfold base. With the sixfold base as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, being. With being as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. I'll try to explain these 12 links of dependent origination. The first one is ignorance. Ignorance is ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, ignorance of the Dhamma. And because of ignorance of the Dhamma, all beings have ignorance of the Dhamma except the Arahant. But in an Arya, the ignorance is cut down, is not as dense as an ordinary Putujana, an ordinary being. So ignorance, because of ignorance of Dhamma, of the Four Noble Truths, volition comes into being. This volition is basically the will to live. In the suttas, this volition in dependent origination consists of three things. The body volition, the verbal volition, and the mental volition. The body volition is the will for the body to live or to function, and that is breathing. Because the body wants to function, the body wants to live, we breathe. Actually, breathing is not automatic. It is intentional. And the second one is verbal volition. Verbal volition is thinking. Because before you can break out into speech, you must think. So you think and then you speak. So this second verbal volition or sankhara is this thinking. And the third one, mental volition, is perception and feeling. Once you have perception and feeling, the mind works. So because you want the mind to work, you want the mind to live, so you have this mental volition. So these basically, volition sankhara is the will for you to live or function through the three ways, the body, speech and mind. If you only function through the body, then you are like a tree. A tree lives, but it does not function through speech and does not function through the mind. So we function through three doors compared to the tree that functions only with the body, exists only with the body. So this sankhara is volition, the will to live basically. And because of the will to live, consciousness comes into being. This consciousness, as we stated just now, consciousness arises and passes away, arises and passes away. When consciousness arises and passes away, it is this volition, this sankhara, the will to live, that makes the consciousness arise again. And then because everything is impermanent, it will cease very fast. And again, because of the will to live, the consciousness arises again. So every consciousness that arises is due to our volition to will, to live. When there's no volition to live, we will die. I saw this very clearly a few nights ago when this wild boar was attacked by the dogs. I went to rescue that wild boar and chase away all of the dogs. And the poor wild boar was panting there. He was bitten all over and he was struggling. He tried to get up, he couldn't get up. He tried a few times to get up, he couldn't get up. Then he realized that he was coming to an end of life. So he was breathing very hard, but suddenly he stopped breathing. Then I saw very clearly, he just let go of the will to live and he went off. So when you have this, you let go of the will to live, then only we go off. So the consciousness stops when there's this letting go of that will to live. So we have this will to live, and consciousness keeps arising. And with consciousness, the counterpart of consciousness is Namarupa. In the suttas, it is stated, Vijnana and Namarupa, they are like Siamese twins. They arise together and cease together. You cannot have consciousness without this mentality, materiality. So consciousness, when you are conscious, you're always conscious of an object. So mentality, materiality is the object of consciousness. What we call phenomena. So this object is either physical or mental. That's why it's called mentality, materiality. So when consciousness and mentality, materiality arise together, then you must have the sixfold base, because this sixfold base is basically the body. Consciousness must rest in the body. So that is the sixfold base, the salayatana. You must have these six senses, six sense bases for consciousness arise. Consciousness either arises at the eye, or at the ear, or at the nose, tongue, body, and mind. So this is the base for consciousness. That's why you must have the sixfold base. And then with the sixfold base as condition, then there is contact. The sense object impinges on the sixfold base, on the sense basis. So with contact as condition, feeling arises, either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And then when pleasant feeling arises, there is a tendency to produce craving. That is for ordinary people. So with feeling as condition, craving arises. And once you have craving, you have attachment, clinging. And then with clinging as condition, a being comes into existence. Why? Because when we enjoy something and we crave for it, you want it very much. When you want something, there is the object, there must be the subject. The subject and the object must come together. So when you attach to something very strongly, that I comes into it. I want this. I cannot do with this. I cannot live without this. So that I comes, that I am comes into being. So once you have that I am, that being coming to existence, then there is birth. This you can see how the difference between, say, like a human being and a plant. A plant also has consciousness, is conscious of sunlight. For example, it tends to go and reach for sunlight. But because it does not think, it does not have craving, so the being does not come into existence. So because we have a being, we are aware when the body arises in the world, we say we are born. You don't say the body is born, you say, I am born on such and such a date. Whereas for the tree, when the tree is born, it does not think, I am born. There's no concept of my birth. But because we have an I, we have the concept of my birth. So we have birth. Once you have being, then you have birth. And once you have birth, you see yourself in the world. Then you see yourself aging, sickening, dying. So it comes along with sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. All the suffering arises because you have that I, and you are born into the world. Because the world is impermanent, so being impermanent, everything changes. So you must grow old, you must become sick and die. That's why the origin of the whole mass of suffering. With birth as condition, be it aging and death, so it was said. Now monks, do aging and death have birth as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? And they replied, aging and death have birth as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case, with birth as condition, aging and death. With being as condition, birth, so it was said. Now monks, does birth have being as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Birth has being as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case, with being as condition, birth. With clinging as condition, being, so it was said. Now monks, does being have clinging as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Being has clinging as condition, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case, with clinging as condition, being. With craving as condition, clinging, so it was said. Now monks, does clinging have craving as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? So the Buddha asked them in this way for all the 12 links of dependent origination, and they answered the Buddha in the same way. Then the Buddha said, good monks, so you say thus, and I also say thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. That is, with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness, etc. Up to aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is giving this formula for dependent origination in a concise form. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. So when something exists, it brings about something else that arises. Because of arising of this, it brings on the arising of that. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. With the cessation of volition, cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of mentality, materiality. With the cessation of mentality, materiality, cessation of the sixfold base. With the cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling, cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. With the cessation of birth, cessation of aging and death, so it was said. Now monks, do aging and death cease with the cessation of birth or not? Or how do you take it in this case? Aging and death cease with the cessation of birth, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of birth, cessation of aging and death. So in the same way, the Buddha repeats, asks them the whole of the 12 links, and they answer in the same way. Good monks, so you say thus, and I also say thus. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is, with the cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. With the cessation of volition, cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of mentality, materiality. With the cessation of mentality, materiality, cessation of the sixfold base. With the cessation of the sixfold base, cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling, cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So here the Buddha says, when this does not exist, when this ceases, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you run back to the past thus? Were we in the past? Were we not in the past? What were we in the past? How were we in the past? Having been what? What did we become in the past? No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you run forward to the future thus? Shall we be in the future? Shall we not be in the future? What shall we be in the future? How shall we be in the future? Having been what? What shall we become in the future? No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you now be inwardly perplexed about the present thus? Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? Before I come to that. So here the Buddha is saying that if a monk understands dependent origination, he understands that all are due to conditions, then he would not run into the past. He would not think of his past. Who was he in the past and all these things. And he would also not think of the future. And he would not be perplexed or doubtful about the present, whether he exists or not and all this. Monks, knowing and seeing this way, would you speak thus? The teacher is respected by us. We speak as we do out of respect for the teacher. No, Venerable Sir. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is asking them, when you know and you see, do you say that we speak in this way, we answer in this way out of respect for the teacher? And they said, no, Venerable Sir. What they mean is that it is because they understand that they answer in this way, and they speak in this way, they speak according to the Dhamma in this way, not because of respect for the teacher, not because of respect for the Buddha, but because they personally understand and see things clearly. Not just out of respect for the Buddha. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? The recluse says this, and so do other recluses, but we do not speak thus. No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you acknowledge another teacher? No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you return to the observances, tumultuous debates, and auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins, taking them as the core of the holy life? No, Venerable Sir. Do you speak only of what you have known, seen, and understood for yourselves? Yes, Venerable Sir. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with this Dhamma, which is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves. For it was with reference to this that it has been said, monks, this Dhamma is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha asked them, do you speak only of what you have known, seen, and understood for yourselves? And they said, yes, Venerable Sir. So in other words, they have seen the Dhamma, they have understood the Dhamma, not just know the theory, they have seen it as it actually is. So that is the purpose of the Dhamma, for us to understand, to see clearly, not just for knowledge's sake. Monks, the conception of an embryo in a womb takes place through the union of three things. Here, there is the union of the mother and father, but it is not the mother's season, and the being to be reborn is not present. In this case, there is no conception of an embryo in a womb. Here, there is the union of the mother and father. It is the mother's season, but the being to be reborn is not present. In this case, too, there is no conception of an embryo in a womb. But when there is the union of the mother and father, and it is the mother's season, and the being to be reborn is present, through the union of these three things, the conception of an embryo in a womb takes place. stop here for a moment. So a being can be born in the womb, that means human birth or animal birth, only with three conditions. First, the mother and father must come together, and then secondly, it is the mother's season. The mother is fertile, there's the egg there, and the being to be born is present. This being, I think in the suttas is called the Gandhabba. So when the egg is fertilized in the womb, then this Gandhabba, this being to be born, enters the womb and lodges itself in the fertilized egg and the embryo. So in the Buddha's teachings, it is not like what the Abhidhamma says, that nothing enters the womb. And here there is a Gandhabba being that enters the womb. In some books, it is called the intermediate body that enters the womb. In Chinese, they call it what? Chung In Shen. And also like this Ling Hun. So this being that enters the womb, you can call it a soul or so. It's just a bundle of energy that enters the womb. The difference between the soul in other religions and in Buddhism is that in other religions the soul is something that is permanent, everlasting, unchanging. But in Buddhism, everything is a flux of conditions. Everything in the world, including the soul, is just a bundle of energy. There's no difference between a human being as a bundle of energy and a ghost as a bundle of energy, or a deva as a bundle of energy, or a soul as a bundle of energy. That's why you can see in one of the psychic powers of the Buddha, from the human body of the Buddha, this astral body can come out through his head, and he can go and talk to his disciples with the astral body. So this concept of a soul, although many monks say there is no soul, it is just a wrong translation. The word anatta is not that there is no soul. The word anatta means there is no being that is unchanging, permanent, everlasting. Everything is changing. There's no single thing. Even the cell, so small, is changing. Even an atom, so small, is changing. The mother then carries the embryo in her womb for 9 or 10 months with much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then at the end of 9 or 10 months, the mother gives birth with much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then when the child is born, she nourishes it with her own blood. For the mother's breast milk is called blood in the noble one's discipline. When he grows up and his faculties mature, the child plays at such games as toy plows, tip cat, somersaults, toy windmills, toy measures, toy cars, and a toy bow and arrow. When he grows up and his faculties mature still further, the youth enjoys himself provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, with forms cognizable by the eye, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Stop here for a moment. So this embryo is born and then grows up, and as a child he plays with childish toys, games. But when he grows up, then he wants to enjoy the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. On seeing a form with the eye, he lusts after it if it is pleasing. He dislikes it if it is unpleasing. He abides with mindfulness of the body unestablished, with a limited mind, and he does not understand as it actually is the deliverance by mind and deliverance by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Engaged as he is in favoring and opposing, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he delights in that feeling, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As he does so, delight arises in him. Now delight in feelings is clinging. With his clinging as condition, being comes to be. With being as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death. sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Similarly, on hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor, tasting a flavor, touching a tangible, cognizing a mind object, he lusts after it if it is pleasing. He dislikes it if it is unpleasing. Now, delight in feelings is clinging. With clinging as condition, being comes to be. With being as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is talking about an ordinary person. After he's born, he grows up, and then he enjoys the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. And when he enjoys the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, he lusts after it if it is pleasing, and dislikes it if it is unpleasing. And because of that, he goes round the cycle of births and deaths. Here monks, Tathagata appears in the world, Arahant, Sammasambuddha, etc. So this is same as Sutta 27, Majjhima Nikaya, paragraph 11 to 18. This is a description of charana, how a person, after listening to the Dhamma of the Buddha, becomes a monk, and then after that he cultivates the practice of a monk, or the conduct of a monk, and then he purifies his mind from doubt. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and abides in the first jhana. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana. With the fading away as well of delight, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of and utter purity of sati and equanimity. This monk, after becoming a monk, he practices the conduct of a monk and then attains the 4 jhanas. Then, on seeing a form with the eye, he does not lust after it if it is pleasing. He does not dislike it if it is unpleasing. He abides with mindfulness of the body established with an immeasurable mind. And he understands as it actually is the deliverance by mind and deliverance by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Having thus abandoned favoring and opposing, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he does not delight in that feeling, welcome it or remain holding to it. As he does not do so, delight in feeling ceases in him. With the cessation of his delight comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Similarly, on hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor, tasting a flavor, touching a tangible, cognizing a mind object, he does not lust after it if it is pleasing. He does not dislike it if it is unpleasing. With the cessation of his delight comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Monks, remember this deliverance through the destruction of craving, as taught in brief by me. But the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, is caught up in a vast net of craving, in the trammel of craving. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. It's the end of the sutta. So here the sutta, the Buddha, in trying to teach the deliverance through the destruction of craving, he brings in the 12 links of dependent origination, how all things arise through conditions and cease through conditions. But you notice in this last part, the Buddha says this person having renounced, then he practices charana, the conduct of a monk, then he abandons the 5 hindrances, attains the 4 jhanas. After he attains the 4 jhanas, then on seeing a form with the eye, he does not lust after it if it is pleasing. He does not dislike it if it is unpleasing. Because he does not delight in feeling, welcome it or remain holding it to it, then there is with the cessation of delight comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being, birth, aging and death, etc. And he becomes liberated. So you see, for him to do that, he can only do that after the 4 jhanas. After he has attained the 4 jhanas, then his mind is so clear and strong that he can remain unmoving as far as feeling is concerned. He is not moved by feelings. So the Buddha always quotes the attainment of this 4 jhanas as a way to liberation. That's all we have time for tonight. Anything to discuss?
Namo Buddhaya Bhante. Bhante, just want to check on the Buddha described the monk Sati as being caught up in a vast net of craving and Temoh of craving. So at first he apprehended him because he has wrong view and thinking that consciousness is permanent. On page 361, I think.
Yeah.
So was wondering, could it be that it's more than just his wrong view, Bhante?
I think what the Buddha is trying to say, that saying about him caught up in craving is that he has not seen non-self, because if you say it is the same consciousness that runs and wanders through the round of rebirths, then that means it is unchanging consciousness. That would be the self. So when you have the self, then you have that craving. So probably that is what the Buddha meant. It's not let go of the self.
This dependent origination, is it applied in the Rupa and Arupa world?
This one, the Buddha, 12 links of dependent origination, is basically about human beings. But if we investigate, let's see, does it apply? This ignorance applies. Volition also applies. Yeah.
Bhante, because the other night you mentioned in the Rupa world, certain beings only have bodies, no consciousness, and in the Arupa world, something only with consciousness. But in the dependent origination, the consciousness and the Rupa have to arise at the same time.
Yes, but this applies only to normal beings with consciousness, because that state, asanya satta, is just a temporary state. Cannot be considered is something out of the way.
Namo Buddhaya Bhante. Yeah. I just want to check with you something about Satipatthana. Probably I got 2 friends. Before I came here, I met the Dhamma when I was in May, this year May, that I met the Dhamma, and I have 2 friends. They seems to know Dhamma very well, and then probably they practice meditation very hard. They do a lot of volunteer works, and then they, I don't know why they get irritated easily, get angry easily, and even I come to hear the Samanera, I check with them, and they discourage me and telling me you should have 2 years experience on Dhamma. And then I feel very disappointed, because even if I go to a Christian or I go to a Catholic, they will encourage me to join, and then having all this Christian talk and this thing, and then I feel is that they need to have practiced Satipatthana, because to contemplate their body, feeling and mind and Dhamma, and then they should think wherever they talk, they should have understand what they should talk, I feel very disappointed, because should I come here for 2 years, where I need to come here for 2 years to study the Dhamma, then I can come to do the Samanera?
The problem is nowadays there are some people, they don't really study the Dhamma. They spend a lot of time and effort and energy in meditation, but they are practicing the wrong meditation. Nowadays, a lot of people practice vipassana meditation, and their interpretation is that this satipatthana, they think they are meditating on satipatthana. They think they are practicing satipatthana, but they are not practicing satipatthana. If you look into the suttas, last year I went through the Samyutta Nikaya. In the Satipatthana Samyutta, the Buddha gave the simile of the cook, who cooks for his master, and there's one cook who does not know the master's taste. There's another cook who knows the master's taste. So, in that sutta, the Buddha said, if a person practices Satipatthana and his mind does not enter samadhi, attain the jhanas, he is not practicing Satipatthana. He thinks only that he is practicing Sati Sampajanya. He is not practicing Sati Sampajanya or Satipatthana at all, according to that sutta. So a lot of people nowadays, they do some simple meditation. A lot of people go for vipassana meditation because it's easy to meditate. For lay people, they tend to go for vipassana meditation because they find their mind is so wild, cannot control, that they cannot practice this samatha meditation. Whereas with the vipassana meditation that they practice nowadays, they think they can contemplate this one object after another object after another object. They think that momentary concentration is easy to practice, but then that is not the Buddha's teaching. So they practice for many years and they waste their time. I know of many monks after teaching vipassana so many years, they disrobe. Disrobe. So they just waste their time, but you cannot teach them. They think they are smarter than you. So the only thing is, we hope that they will refer to the Buddha's suttas.
So
that's why.
No point to talk to them.
No point to talk to them. They are smart. They think you don't know anything compared to them.
This dependent origination was realized by Buddha at the time of enlightenment. Is it true? Because this one seems to be discourse to the monks.
Not really. The Buddha in the suttas, he said that even when he was a bodhisattva, before he was enlightened, he had some understanding of dependent origination. But after the Buddha was enlightened, to really have a deep understanding of dependent origination, this Buddha spent the whole night, contemplating dependent origination. The first watch of the night, from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m., he contemplated the arising of dependent origination. Then the second watch, from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m., he contemplated the ceasing of dependent origination. And then the last watch, 2 until 6 a.m., he contemplated the arising and ceasing of dependent origination. Then only he was satisfied. He fully understood dependent origination. So dependent origination, there are many levels. Just like the Dhamma, when you understand the Dhamma on a shallow level, you become a first stage Arya. When you understand it at a higher level, you become a second stage Arya, and so on. Okay.
On Sutta 38, paragraph 24, page 358, the Buddha mentioned here auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins. Knowing and seeing in this way, we return to the observances, Samarthas, debate and auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins. What does the mean of this?
It's not very clear what the auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins mean. But in our present day, maybe you can take it like feng shui, geomancy. Okay, we end here.